Welcome to Witch Hunt. I'm Mary Bingham. In this episode of Witch Hunt Victim Stories, I will talk about Susannah Martin. Olney is a small town located in North Buckinghamshire County in England. In the early 1620s, lace making was central to its economy, and the community was known to gather every week at the local market. Olney was also known for its annual pancake races, dating back to 1445, and is still celebrated today as a community event which signals the end of the church cycle known as ordinary time, celebrated in the Catholic and Anglican faiths, among others. It is comparable to what is celebrated in Louisiana, known as Mardi Gras. Born in 1621, Susannah North would have known about this tradition, as this was the place of her birth. Maybe Susannah's mother, Joan North, participated in this gleeful event, which required the women to rise early to start prepping those pancakes. Once the church bell sounded, the women would run from a designated start line or from their houses to the church door, tossing those pancakes high in the air until they reached the church door. Then a day of celebration would begin before people moved into the Lenten season. From events like these, we know that Susannah possibly experienced fun in her early life before she immigrated with her father, Richard, her mother, and her two sisters, probably during the Great Migration before 1638. Susannah was most likely employed as a servant to Captain Thomas Wiggins at Swampscott, Massachusetts. Long after her marriage to George Martin, Susannah was accused by an unknown person of having a child out of wedlock and strangling it in Captain Wiggins' stable. Susannah supposedly threatened the bystander with death while holding his collar if he said a word to anyone. The court found lack of evidence that Susannah bore or even murdered a child. At that same court session that year, George Martin filed a writ against Thomas Sargent for saying that their two oldest sons were a bastard and an imp. This case was withdrawn. The witch accusation against Susannah was also tried at this court and found for George Martin, who fought hard for his wife. Something he always did, be it for her best interest, his own best interest, or for them as a couple. Either way, she was always had George going to bat for her since they married August 11th, 1646. The one volatile court case that has ties to her witch trial case in 1692 is very poignant due to the magistrates present at the court for at least one of those hearings regarding the numerous lawsuits after Susannah's stepmother died in 1670. You see, in 1667, Richard North left a will with the following legacies. His daughter, Mary Jones, Susannah's oldest sister, was left £5. Then he gave to his granddaughter, Anne Bates, daughter of Richard's deceased daughter, Sarah Oldham, £5, provided that she was still alive upon Richard's death. These legacies were paid out by Ursula, as shown by receipts introduced as evidence in future court cases. However, there is no record of the legacies being paid, the 20 shillings to Susannah and George Martin. So again, Richard gave 20 shillings to Susannah, and I'm going to quote, "And then 10 pounds the said George Martin doth owe unto me for cattle which he received of me," end quote. Contrary to popular opinion, it seems to me that George and Susannah are getting the better deal. It seems that by his words, Richard is forgiving the debt rather than having George pay into the estate. But let us know what you all think in the comments below. Usually, when the patriarch died, the oldest son inherited a double portion of the estate, or sometimes the two oldest sons equally received the bulk of the estate. Since Richard didn't have any surviving sons upon his death, he could have issued a legacy to be equally split between Mary and Susannah, but he didn't. Now, one could surmise that Mary and Susannah might have assumed that their stepmother, Ursula, would give them the equal portion when she died and was shocked when she didn't. But after looking at all the evidence, it seems that Richard should have been the one to secure his daughter's legacies, and that Ursula, since she did not have any biological children with Richard, probably wanted to skip over Susannah and Mary, and we will never know why. Again, George fought hard. He and Susannah appealed the court's decisions each time they lost, for a total of 5 appeals before giving up. Everything else was left to Richard's wife, Ursula, in Richard's original will. And Ursula died exactly 3 years later to the day that Richard died. But again, she left out Mary and Susannah from her will and passed almost the entire estate to Mary Jones's daughter, Mary Winsley, and her husband, Nathaniel. At first, Mary didn't fight, maybe because her own daughter received a hefty inheritance. But George fought on behalf of Susannah, and Mary eventually joined in 1673, when, during the case of George in the right of his wife and Mary Jones, accused Nathaniel Winsley of withholding housing and other estate of Richard North due to what they felt was the manipulation of Thomas Bradbury and Mary Winsley, who was Mary Jones's daughter. And don't forget that Mary Winsley was also Susannah's niece. So George was required to pay Nathaniel Winsley's court costs, but George decided not to do that, and he was hauled off to jail at the request of Nathaniel. Not only that, but the jailer, John Suter, let George go without permission. So John Suter filed a suit against George Martin's sons, George Jr. and Richard, for, and I quote, forfeiture of a bond by which the defendants, George and Richard, agreed to save Suter harmless from Nathaniel Winsley, end quote. The verdict was for John Suter. And guess who was the chief magistrate on this case? William Stoughton. So now we know that William Stoughton knew the Martin family when he listened to evidence against Susannah at her trial 18 years later, June 29th, 1692. Sadly, George, who had then now been deceased for about 8 years, was not there to help her this time. And in 1692, many offered testimonies and depositions against Susannah regarding her character. John Allen got so mad after Susannah wanted to use his ox that was already overworked and ready to be put out to pasture near the beach for the day. Things got physical, and Allen nearly threw Susannah in a nearby brook. When Allen went to fetch his oxen later, all 16 took off for the sea. Only 3 returned home after days of gone missing. Jarvis Ring probably experienced some type of sleep paralysis when he was held down in darkness by what he believed to be Susannah's specter, and her specter supposedly bit his finger. John Pressey believed he saw Susannah watching him one night when he was lost in the woods by her house. He struck at a moving light which looked like a turkey cock, lost his balance, and fell into a hole. Pressey was afraid to inquire how Susannah was when he heard that she wasn't feeling well soon after. Robert Downer was harassed one night by something in the shape of a cat. He remembered that Susannah referred to a she-devil that would take him away after he told her that she was a witch, and that referred to her first witch trial case. Elizabeth Brown testified against Susannah at her first witchcraft trial after Elizabeth allegedly saw Susannah vanish before her own eyes. Then Elizabeth began to experience physical and mental distress every time Susannah came near. Though her faith community prayed for her, Elizabeth's husband said that her mental state was such that no doctor could help her. Susannah defended herself during her preliminary hearing on May 2nd, which would have been conveyed at her trial. These are her words when she was badgered by the two magistrates in the overcrowded, noisy, dark meeting house. I have no hand in witchcraft. I desire to lead myself according to the word of God. And when the magistrates asked what she thought ailed the girls having the fits before her, Susannah answered, I do not desire to spend my judgment upon it. When the magistrates asked to tell her thoughts about the girls, Susannah answered, why, my thoughts are my own when they are in, but when they are out, they are another's. They asked if she would lie. Susannah declared, I dare not tell a lie if it would save my life. Susannah did not lie, and her life was not saved. Her beloved husband was gone, and no other family members stepped up for her. William Stoughton signed her death warrant on July 12, 1692, only giving her 1 week until her brutal death on July 19th. Maybe her immediate family did not step forward to reverse her attainder, but her descendants and historians pushed through until Susannah was exonerated on October 31st, 2001. And now, the portion of Interstate 495 in Massachusetts, which runs through her former farm in Amesbury, has a sign that says, Susannah North Martin Highway. Thank you.